Luthen Rael built the rebellion. He connected the cells, lit the fuse, and shaped the movement into something the Empire would one day fear.
I'm thinking like a soldier. Think like a leader.
But if he was that important, why isn't he in Rogue One? Since Season 1, Luthen's been a man haunted by purpose.
I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
That wasn't just a line, that was a warning. He knew the mission might outlive him, and honestly, that might have been the plan all along. Because what if his death isn't just inevitable? What if it's the final move that pushes the rebellion into open war? A calculated sacrifice that gives Mon Mothma the edge, Cassian the mindset, and the galaxy the spark it needs to fight back.
If it goes up in flames, it will burn very brightly.
Before we get into it, don't forget to leave a thumbs up on today's video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to catch more Andor Season 2 coverage, then you're in the right place. Now, without further ado, let's dive into Luthen Rael and what his possible outcomes would mean for the rebellion moving forward.
The ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything!
Alright, so here's the thing. Luthen Rael wasn't just part of the rebellion, he is the rebellion, or at least the foundation of what it becomes. While characters like Mon Mothma was still trying to play politics, and Saw was off doing his own chaotic thing, Luthen was the one pulling the strings in the background, trying to get all these disconnected groups to work toward the same goal. And that's really what sets him apart. He understood that if they stayed fractured, if they kept acting in isolation, nothing would ever really change. So instead of picking sides, he started building. It doesn't matter if you're a senator or a saboteur, if you're willing to fight the Empire, he'll find a place for you. That's why he spends so much of his time scouting out the right people, not just leaders but assets, people like Lonnie, buried inside the ISB, feeding him intel at great personal risk.
We can't let you go, Lonnie. We can't spare you. We've been grooming you for too long.
And then there's Cassian. When others saw a liability, Luthen saw a weapon. Someone with the skills to strike the Empire where it hurts, as long as you could get him pointed in the right direction. And yeah, then came Aldani, which wasn't just about credits, it was about getting the word out to the wider galaxy. It was Luthen's way of saying, we're here and the Empire can bleed. So yeah, he lit that spark on purpose, not just to fund the cause, but also to provoke a response. Because he knew that once the Empire started cracking down, more people would wake up and join the fight. And that's really the pattern with Luthen. Everything he does has layers, every move is calculated to create a ripple effect. That's why he's so dangerous and so necessary at the same time. He puts the mission first, always. Even when it costs lives, even when it hurts. If it comes down to losing a key ally or preserving the entire network, he doesn't flinch, he can't. Which brings us to the uncomfortable truth. He's not in Rogue One. So you have to ask, is this just how the story played out, or is it how he wanted it to? Because if there's one thing we know for sure, it's that Luthen doesn't leave anything to chance. Now here's where things really start to shift, because if Luthen does see the end coming, and it seems like he does, then the question becomes, what's his next move? The rebellion in Season 2 is no longer the scattered network he spent years building in the shadows. It's becoming something bigger, something public. And as that transformation happens, Luthen will probably start to feel like a man out of place. His tactics, which were once necessary, now run the risk of undermining everything they're working toward, because let's face it, there's a difference between sparking a revolution and managing one. And Luthen, he's the type of guy that's likely always been better at lighting fires than putting them out. Anyways, what makes it so interesting is that we're not just watching a rebel struggle against the Empire, we're watching him wrestle with the very movement he helped create.
You told me we were building a network.
What were my words?
He's surrounded by people he handpicked, people like Mon Mothma and Cassian, who are now stepping into leadership roles and shaping the rebellion into something new, something that might not have room for someone like him anymore. And here's where things start to take a turn. Luthen doesn't just create rebels, he creates the people who might one day decide that he's gone too far, that he's outlived his usefulness, and if he's half as perceptive as we believe he is, he's already thought about that possibility. Maybe he's even planning for it. So now we're left asking, is Luthen really heading toward a final stand, or is he already setting up his exit? Does he go out fighting the Empire, or does someone from within take him down before he becomes a threat to the rebellion's future? Whatever the answer is, you can feel the clock ticking. And something tells me that when that time comes, it won't just be the end of the man, it will be the beginning of something much bigger. Anyway, so far we've seen how Luthen might be positioning himself not as a casualty, but as a necessary sacrifice. Someone who sets the whole thing in motion, then steps away when the rebellion no longer needs him. But what if that's not just a theory? What if that's the actual plan? The Gorman massacre could be his one final play, not to die in it, but to use it. to push Mon Mothma into the spotlight, to force her hand, because if the Empire does what Luthen expects them to do, and let's be honest, he's been right about their behavior before,
We need them angry. We need them coming down hard. Oppression breeds rebellion.
then Mon has no choice but to stand up and lead, and when she does, Luthen becomes irrelevant, or worse, dangerous. Because while Mon Mothma might be the voice of the rebellion, Luthen is still very much the architect, and architects don't always get credit for the building once it's finished. So what happens when the rebellion finally becomes what he wanted it to be, but no longer has space for the man who built it? And that's where his death starts to feel less like a twist of fate, and more like a deliberate move to tie it all together, not just to trigger public support, but to unify the rebel cells, bring Saw Gerrera back to the table, and force a fractured movement to finally stand as one.
We need to pull together, Saw. There's no chance any of us can make it real on our own.
But if Luthen knows this is coming, why go through with it? Why plan your own end? Maybe the answer lies in his past, because we don't know the full story of Luthen Rael, at least not yet. But if we could take this cold efficiency and combine it with those rare haunted looks we often see from him, a picture starts to form. A man who wasn't born a revolutionary, but who became one because the Empire left him no choice. Maybe he lost his family, maybe he lost the life he loved. Wherever it was, it broke him and rebuilt him into this, a man who doesn't care if history remembers him just as long as the mission survives. Which raises the question here, if Luthen's death is part of the plan, then what type of plan ends with your own disappearance? And more importantly, what if it's the only way the rebellion wins?
If it goes up in flames, it will burn very brightly.
By now we've looked at how Luthen might choose to sacrifice himself, but what if he doesn't get the chance to decide at all? That brings us to the darkest twist yet. It's pretty wild, but the rebellion might be the ones to take him out, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Because while Luthen was essential in building the early rebellion, his extremism might be exactly what makes him a threat to its future. He's not someone you can put in front of senators or align with Mon Mothma's long-term vision. At some point, the very people he empowered, Cassian, Kleya, maybe even Saw in a way, might decide he's gone too far. Cassian's been caught in Luthen's web since the beginning. This is the man who used him as a weapon and nearly had him killed when he became a loose end, and now Cassian's becoming a leader in his own right. He'll be starting to see the line between what's necessary and what's too far, and if Luthen crosses it again, maybe Cassian will now draw his own.
I'm thinking like a soldier. Think like a leader.
But the one to really watch here is Kleya. She's the closest to him, the only one who knows every piece of the game. And while Luthen still shows flickers of emotion, Kleya's a lot colder, more calculated. She sees things through the lens of survival, of logic, so if she ever decided that Luthen was slipping, or worse, becoming a liability, I don't think she'd hesitate, because Luthen once gave the order to eliminate Cassian to protect the cause. Kleya might take that logic one step further, because what's the most Luthen Rael thing you could do? Sacrifice yourself for the bigger picture. And maybe, in her mind, that means removing him before he can bring the whole thing down. But even if the rebellion doesn't turn on him, there's still the Empire. The ISB have been circling for a while now, digging through reports, tracing actions back to a mysterious figure they've named Axis. And while Luthen is careful, he's not flawless. Berix was his first mistake, and even he knew it. He hesitated to shut down the radio link, and that delay could have easily been all the ISB needed to close in. And that's the irony. Luthen once said the Empire's greatest weakness is their arrogance, and maybe that same arrogance is beginning to cloud his judgment. He moves like he's untouchable, like every piece is under control, but the longer this goes on, the more you start to wonder, is he becoming the very thing he swore to fight? He's even admitted it himself.
I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them.
Noble words, but tragic ones too, because when you walk down that path long enough, you start to not notice the difference. So if the ISB gets to him, it won't be with blasters or battleships, it'll be with pattern recognition, quiet arrests, cold corridors kind of thing.
I know this. If I was them, this is how I'd do it.
And instead of a blaze of glory, Luthen could die in silence, just another name crossed off by the machine he dedicated his life to tearing down. And maybe that's the real tragedy, not that he dies, but that he dies a shadow, alone, unseen, and never knowing if it was all worth it. So yeah, after everything we've talked about, the betrayal, the ISB, the sacrifices, there's still one version of this story that hasn't been ruled out, that's far less tragic. And that's what if Luthen doesn't die? What if after all the moves he's made, he just takes a step back and walks away? Because let's be real, Luthen's never been about the spotlight. He's not the leader with the speech. I mean, he does say some pretty damn good stuff, but it's always one-on-one, never at least in front of an audience.
I didn't risk my ass for the Starpath unit. I came for you.
Anyways, he's not the face of the movement either. He's the guy pulling the strings from behind the curtain, and maybe once Mon Mothma takes control and the rebellion becomes something official, something public, Luthen recognises that his part of the story is done. He's not in Rogue One. And that might not mean he's dead. It might mean he simply chose not to be there, that he intentionally removed himself from the picture once the galaxy no longer needed him front and centre.
If it's a trap, we've already lost.
Imagine him still out there, no longer the architect of rebel cells and sabotage, but a silent guardian of the cause. Setting up secret intel networks, moving cargo under the radar, maybe even passing whispers, messages to Mon Mothma from the edges of the galaxy. The rebellion wouldn't even know he was still helping, but he would. That's what makes this theory hit a little different. It's not about Luthen winning, it's not even about him surviving. It's about him knowing that the mission has become bigger than him and choosing to step back, because for Luthen, disappearing might actually turn out to be the most selfless thing he's ever done. So yeah, not dying for the cause, but letting go of it and trusting that the people he brought together can carry the fight forward without him.
The network's been built. It's up. It grows or it dies.
And maybe Luthen doesn't need a funeral or a final blaze of glory. Maybe he just needs to vanish, very much becoming a ghost in the system or a whisper in the war. So yeah, I really wanted to explore every possible angle of Luthen's fate in Season 2 because he's one of the most important characters of the show, right up there with Mon Mothma and Cassian, and of course, they make it to Rogue One, but Luthen doesn't. So while we all have our theories, the truth is, his fate is still a complete mystery. Now personally, I think he dies. Not because the show needs a big emotional moment, but because of the kind of story Andor is. It's grounded, it's political, and it's heavy. Death in this show carries weight, and if Luthen's going out, it won't be for shock value, it'll be because the story needs him to. Because that death means something, and more than that, it's about legacy. Luthen might not live to see the rebellion succeed, but he'll definitely be the reason it can. The people he inspired, the decisions, some of them brutal, that he made along the way, that's what echoes through the rest of the timeline. He's the guy who took the rebellion from idea to infrastructure, but once that system's in place, maybe it can't move forward with him still in it. That's the real tragedy, and maybe the beauty of it too. I think we're going to see some of those questionable calls come through this season, decisions that show just how far the rebellion had to go to even stand a chance against the Empire, and it'll probably catch people off guard the same way Cassian did in the opening of Rogue One when he shot that ally out of nowhere. People forget, the rebellion isn't clean. It's messy, and Andor Season 2 is going to lead into that more than ever. In the end, Luthen might not survive this story, but the rebellion, it survives because of him. Maybe, just maybe, it can only survive if he's no longer around. Anyways, that's just my take. What do you think happens to Luthen in Season 2? As always, drop your thoughts, theories, and wilder speculations down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming ones. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one, and may the Force be with you.